All right, what is up, everybody? Today we're just continuing with the Master Games opening mistakes, and we're going to pick up right where we left off in the previous video, and that is with the D4 opening, and it leads to many different variations. So sort of continuing the trend from last time, we have this game where the opponent with the black pieces replies with b5, so going for the Polish defense. So we're going to have one more of that, and then we will transition to something different than b5 as the reply to d4. So this game was played in 1989 in Berlin, Germany, and the player with the white pieces is Georg Bobber, and the player with the black pieces is Werner Loch. So as we mentioned, we have d4, b5, the first two moves. So again, just to mention, what's the idea behind this move? It's to take a little bit more control of the queen side right away, and primarily it is to develop this bishop to this knight diagonal to attack this rook, to make it a bit hard for black to potentially develop the bishop. And as we mentioned, when somebody plays b5 against you, you want to take the full center. So this is exactly what Mr. Bobber with the white pieces does. And black just continues with the plan, going for b7. And here we've seen different moves. We've seen this, just numbing this bishop right away. We've seen just developing. We have seen c4, trying to trade these pieces here. These pawns rather, and to open the queen's sort of attack towards the king and attacking the bishop. So one thing that we have seen, let's say if white played this and then there was a trade, we've seen something weird, I believe, like that, for example. This is a mistake because white just goes queen here and you're threatening checkmate in one move. That's no falling. Okay, white is threatening checkmate in one move, and you're also attacking the bishop. The only thing to defend properly is like this, and then you take the pawn, you develop, and you're much better. That didn't happen. The c4 move didn't happen, so instead white just actually decided to take the pawn, saying, okay, I'll trade this pawn for this pawn, you can take it. But black here doesn't take the pawn straight away, even though this is completely fine, and it leads to a position where white is a little bit better, but white is not winning with correct play. It should be a draw, but black is going to, I mean, by already playing the abolish opening, you are sort of acknowledging that you will likely be worse out of the opening, but you're hoping that white is going to make an inaccuracy or a mistake that will allow you to actually use the power of this bishop to really attack white's kingside, let's say if white castles kingside. So black could take here, but black doesn't take, and instead black plays f5. And f5 is trying to, the best I can put it, the best I understand it, f5 is going for a lot of complications. So the idea, of course, here is if you take the pawn, I'm going to take this pawn, and then I'm going to take this rook. And so, yes, I'm going to be down a pawn, and especially capture, I'm going to be down two pawns, but then I'll recapture the pawn, and then I'll capture the bishop, the rook, sorry, here. And I'm going to shatter your king side with just this bishop, and then I'm going to develop, and I will be able to defend even though my king is open. And white here just decided to capture the pawn. And even though it seems like a big blunder, like this is the whole idea of black, is to go and capture this pawn and then capture this rook. If you open the center like this, maybe going like that would have been better, or I don't know, doing maybe closing the bishop right away would also have been good, but white just decided to take, and black recaptured the bishop. Of course, the whole idea was behind this, controlling this diagonal and then taking this rook and then going back with the bishop and being better. But white actually So here either black is winning and you just completely blundered, or there is something in the position and this is not the best move. And indeed there is something for white. So white just played queen to h5, and if you notice, the king has nowhere to go. So the only way to stop checkmate is to push b6, which is exactly what black does. And so white just captures on b6, and white is saying, okay, if you capture my rook now, I'm going to push this pawn with a check. You will be, and actually that would be checkmate. So you can't take this bishop because this is checkmate and this is also checkmate. And if it wasn't the checkmate, you would just be winning a rook here. So taking the rook is out of the question for now. And of course you can't take the pawn because you can't take the pawn as black because the king just captures the rook, and then maybe your bishop wouldn't be able to get out. So black defends the rook now, thinking about maybe capturing this pawn, but white just says, okay, I'll take another pawn because this is a discovered check and I'm taking this pawn. There's really nothing you can do apart from move your king. Black moves his king, and black isn't lost. With correct play, this is still a game. White is better, even if black captures this rook now. So what white decides to do is completely disregard this yet again and just develop the knight here. And this is a crazy position. Like, the engine at first thinks that this is a blunder, and then it calculates a little further and it understands that actually this is a good move and it does keep a lot of the advantage for white. And the only thing here that doesn't pretty much lose immediately is what was played in the game, and it's knight f6. The point behind knight f6 is you're attacking this pawn twice and you're attacking this queen. So the only reasonable move for white is to go queen to g6. And white is still better. I mean, if you capture this pawn, I'm probably just going to attack your bishop, because if you move the bishop, then I'm going to just pretty much checkmate you. Whether I'm just going to take the queen, then I'm going to take the rook, and you're just completely busted. So again, you cannot take this rook here. Or rather, I went a little bit off track. Yeah, you can't capture this pawn because this happens. So what black decided to play is just to capture a bishop that was kind of free here, and really white isn't lost. White is actually still in a much better position, and it's very difficult for black to play this because any mistakes lead to checkmate or winning of a lot of material. But for white it's the same. Any mistakes here and white loses terribly too. So white just decided to play a reasonable move. You get your rook out of danger and you're threatening checkmate. And what black decided to do is just to capture this pawn. The rook is protected by the knight. The rook is protecting the bishop, so this isn't the problem. And here white is still better. With best play, white is winning, and this is hard for me to understand, so I just decided that I was going to show you the variation of the best engine moves to really show why this position is so powerful for white. And so starting with this move, so what the engine is saying is, okay, black is in a bit of a predicament here, but for now there is no way to break through, so you need to get more pieces into the game. Black just retreats because the bishop was under attack, and reasonable. You attack the rook here. Your idea is to somehow win this knight and then win this rook. So black needs to get some space to open the queen's protection towards this knight and to allow the queen to maybe move somewhere and really start developing pieces. As I mentioned, the idea is here is to take the knight, and then it doesn't matter what recaptures the knight, you just take the rook and then you take the bishop and you win. But it's not so simple. Black just captures the bishop, you capture with your bishop, and again you can't take this bishop because you lose the rook here. So white decided to take the knight with the bishop and to mess up white's pawn structure further. And now you play this bishop to g5 move, because you're threatening to, again, you're just threatening to take the knight, and the knight is pinned, it can't move, and then you're gonna win the rook. So white defends against this. Now if you take the knight, I just take your queen. So you kind of have to trade queen. I mean, first you can take the knight, this isn't the problem, because if well, exactly because of what happens in the game. First black captured with the discovered check to get to win this pawn and to slightly improve their pawn structure. And then black just traded the queens. There is nothing better to do. I mean, if you take, which is exactly what happened in the game. And then when everything is said and done, white is just up 2 pawns and with a much better structure. I mean, this is definitely winning. And by going here, you're putting a rook behind the passed pawn, and your plan is to go and march this pawn as far up the board as you can, make black give up 1 rook for this pawn to avoid you from giving giving you a queen, and then you just win because you trade another rook and you have a rook and 3 pawns against 2 pawns in the game, of course completely winning. So yeah, and so these moves are pretty far away from this position where the engine says you should move with knight to d2 and really develop, and I showed you the best moves. But here white decided to play bishop to g5 right away, sort of attacking the knight right away and threatening to take the knight and then take the rook. But this is completely losing for white, and after the next move white just resigned, because black simply moves his light squared bishop to e4, which is protected by the knight, and attacking the queen with the next ray protecting the rook. So there is really nothing better to do than just to take the rook and allow black to capture your queen for the rook. There's really nothing to do. There's nowhere that the queen can go. All the squares are taken, everything defends everything very nicely in the white's camp. And if you give up, and if you take the knight, I will just take the queen and you're just losing here. Because even if you give a check and then you win another, so I'm saying, like, if you do something like this. Oh, this is even check, so you're not winning any bishops here anyway. So going back to the position, this move is completely losing for white because it takes away the queen's, first of all, support from the rook, and second of all, the queen's escape squares that it could go to. So black just played bishop to e4 and white resigned. So whenever you're attacking, just be careful of the squares that your queen has to go to, because in this position it seems like, oh, I have some squares that I can go to, it's not a problem, but you missed one move, and so that stems from the fact that you brought your queen out very early and you got it into the attack, and if you had one more tempo then you would be completely winning. But that's why you always have to be careful. You don't have that tempo, and with the correct play, black was able to trap white's queen and win this game. So whenever you're attacking, be careful and really calculate that your most valuable pieces have some escape squares and they're not stacked in their opponent's camp. Okay, let's move on to the next game. And here we are going away from bishop b5. Oh, I mean, sorry, b5 on the first move, so the Polish defense. So we have d4. Oh, I didn't mention where this game was played. So this game was played in Bucharest, Romania in 1993. The player with the white pieces is Calin Gavrilescu, and the player with the black pieces is Vlad Tomescu. So I imagine two Romanian players. But just another thing I wanted to mention. I'm only covering games that were played by masters. So FIDE masters, national masters, grand masters, international masters, all those very strong players. So on the first move we have d4, then we have knight to c6, and then we have bishop to b5. So already a non-standard opening. And what the engine is saying is that if you play d4 and your opponent plays knight to c6, you should go d5 and really expand in the center, ask questions of this knight, like where is it going, you're giving me. So let's say if something like this was to happen, this knight is misplaced, and if you go something like this, I'm winning your knight here. So you have to be very careful. But white decided to play bishop to g5, and black replied with f6. I mean, f6 is okay. It says that the position is completely equal and there's nothing bad to do. In fact, this bishop to g5 move is an inaccuracy. It's not what the engine wants. The engine really says that you should really go for it. But I guess Mr. Gavrilescu here was trying to take his opponent out of the book, and he prepared something non-standard to confuse his opponent. So let's see if it worked. As we said, bishop. So we had f6, and then the bishop retreated to h4, and we have knight to h6, e3, just strengthening this pawn here, opening up the bishop, maybe here or here, most likely here, because this is seems like a very strong diagonal for that bishop, which is exactly why black is trying to close the diagonal. Now, of course, this isn't possible, and the engine really doesn't like f4. The engine says that you should play something like knight to f3, or even knight to c3, just continue developing and you would be better. But black wanted to go all in. I'm not sure what the exact idea here is, but I guess white is trying to make it as hard as possible for black to break in the center and really free this bishop to roam. Because going here is blocking this bishop in, and if you go here, you're messing up black's pawn structure. You're probably going to trade the queens, and then this bishop is suddenly going to become a lot more powerful. But okay, black played bishop to a5 in response to the f4 move, and black just wanted to make this very strong, because the bishop is out on this side. Maybe the bishop can even draw back and become a valuable defensive piece, because it's not doing all that much here. But as we said, this is a bit problematic now. So the idea here behind moving this bishop, as we can see, white wanted to play this move and free this bishop without locking in the light squared bishop. And we see a little bit more, we understand a little bit more the idea behind c3. Now, even if this bishop develops, where is it going to develop? All these squares are taken, and you can develop to here or here. I mean, this is an alright square. This is a bit passive, so that's why this move was played, so that it's not easy to develop this bishop here. We just have a normal h3 move. Then black played bishop to b6. To d6, sorry, just continuing development. And then here white played knight to d2. Already just looking at this position, I would probably prefer something like this and then castle, or maybe like this and then castle queenside. This seems like a bit of a passive move. It seems like there's a lot going on here, and just bringing your knight to d2 is a bit questionable. But black just played g5, and even though black is a little bit better, black is not winning or anything. You can just take, or you can just drop your bishop, or most likely you should just take. The engine says that, although the engine says bishop to g3 is fine. But I would just probably take and maybe then check. But white decided to go for this check right away. And the problem with this is that black doesn't have to move the king and lose the knight. Black doesn't even have to move the knight and lose a pawn. What black did in this position was simply play bishop to g6, and white is completely losing. So after this queen h5 move with check right away, even though it seems like you're winning a knight, this is actually a very big blunder, because in this position white has really nothing better to do. If you move your queen, you just lose your bishop and you're down a piece, you're losing this game. So white decided to try and hold on to the piece. Of course, now if you take, I'm just gonna take back and everything is great for me. I'm up a pawn and my structure is better. I'm infiltrating with the queen. I'm probably gonna win this game. But black just played bishop to f8, going back to its original square, and now you see the problem. Obviously the queen is attacked and the queen has nowhere to go. There's nowhere the queen can go, and so white just resigned to this position, because I mean, you might take the bishop with the queen, and I mean, you see, you're losing a queen for a bishop most likely here, because you could take this way, but no matter what you do, you've lost the queen for the bishop, and you're going to very quickly lose this game. So if we go back to the position, what white should have played instead of this instead of this queen to h5 move, white should have just taken the pawn, and then after black recaptures, only then go queen to h5. Because now if you block, I'm just gonna take this pawn and I'm okay with trading queens, and if you go here, what would I do? I would probably just take the knight, and if you take the bishop with check, then everything is still okay. My queen is already infiltrating your camp, and at least I'm not losing, and I'm probably better. So white would have to block, and this is check as well, so white would have to block check with a knight, and then actually in this position you're not winning any pawns, but you're not losing any bishops either, or queens. So this was definitely a much better continuation, but white decided to play queen h5 check right away, and now white just simply walked into the trapping the queen. So you capture the knight, you can capture the bishop, but you've given up a queen for two minor pieces, and in a position like this, this is going to cost you dearly. You're gonna lose this game terribly. So let's move on to the next game, and this game was played in Sofia, Bulgaria in 1970, and it was played between Asen Venert with the white pieces against Ventsislav Michkarov with the black pieces. I think I bungled out those names, but I hope you forgive me for that. So again, we have d4, we have knight to c6, and as we mentioned, d5 here is the best move. You're really expanding in the center, you're preparing to cement this pawn here and ask a lot of questions of this knight and develop a lot of pieces with tempo against the knight. So white is already in a much better position after knight to c6. But white decided to calmly just play c4, maybe go for the Catalan like I usually do. I pretty much play d4, c4, almost no matter what my opponent does. Of course, if my opponent does play something weird like this, then I would have to change, but other than that, this is like a standard, something standard for me. This is what I do a lot with the Catalan, and I mean it works alright, but black decided to play knight to f6, and white went to with knight to f3, just continuing development. Everything is normal here. With every passing move, white is just keeping that little advantage that he had, and it makes sense. Both parties are developing, but white always has this move to kick away this knight, which is why white is a little bit better. But white is basically like up a tempo, and with a bit more central control as well, so that's why white is a little bit better. Black plays bishop to g4, and now white goes for d5. And there's nothing wrong with this or anything. White just went knight to e4, and this is a common knight tactic in a lot of these positions. And you're okay with giving up this knight for this knight and ruining your pawn structure a little bit, because you're saying that you're trying to get a little bit more counterplay, you're a bit more developed. Because white played this move, you developed. Okay, so but white here just played knight to d2, and this is completely losing for simple tactics. So white just didn't want to trade. White wanted to keep his advantage and not trade, and this is where you have to learn to sometimes trade in a favorable position, because you are messing up your opponent's pawn structure. Yes, they're a bit more developed, but even if you trade, your position is still going to be a lot better, because I mean, look at this. This isn't great, and in fact, you just develop this bishop here, and black is going to have a lot of problems defending. So this is definitely the way to go, but as we said, white decided to play knight to d5, after knight to e5, white decided to play knight to d2, and now this is a completely losing because of a simple tactic. Black just played knight to d3 check, and the king has nowhere to go, and the only thing they can capture the knight is this pawn, so this is forced, and of course you just win the queen here. And no matter what black captures with, or white captures with rather, there is nothing for white to do in this position. Black's pawn structure is just perfect, and if you win a queen for 2 pieces, then this central control doesn't really do anything almost at all for white, and you're just gonna completely win this game. Of course, you could take the bishop. I mean, it's black's move. White would just take the queen and then, I don't know, do something like this, just castle and just completely crush white. So if we go back, in this position you should trade. You should recognize that this pawn is a little bit weak, and then this could be a problem if this pawn couldn't capture. And so by going here, you walk directly into the tactic, and then of course this is forced and you lose your queen. So always be careful, always be on the lookout for checks or for moves that attack the queen. You always have to monitor if you capture something or if you move your queen somewhere. Always be careful that it has an escape square. And in positions like this, you have more space. I mean, usually when you have more space, you don't want to trade pieces, you want to keep the pressure. But here you're doubling white's pawns, and this diagonal becomes extremely weak. You just, as we've seen, you just go like this. And then you're probably going to enjoy a better position, keep the pressure on your opponent. And if your opponent plays perfectly, maybe they can draw. But by avoiding trading pieces, I mean, and also on the more basic level, you're moving your knight away from a more central square. And it would, I mean, it's not that bad if not for the fact that this is attacked. So when your king is stuck in the middle, don't be afraid to trade pieces and cement your better position here. So I hope you enjoyed some of those games and you learned something from them. We're going to continue this series with opening mistakes by masters, and this is just the third video of this sort. Please do let me know what you do like, what you dislike, whether there's something I can improve, and things like that. Thank you very much, and until next time.